Welcome to Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. I'm a board-certified music therapist, author, and expert on how to use music to relieve stress fast. This podcast is sponsored by McConnell Music Therapy Services, Inc., where they believe in the power of music to transform people and communities. Based in Northern California, their board-certified music therapists support people of all ages and abilities within hospitals, schools, corporations, and communities using music experience to connect, express, and de-stress. Visit them at mcconnellmts.com or their Facebook page, McConnell Music Therapy. This episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold is also sponsored by Dr. Nisi, trainer and certifier of master and executive coaches, because she believes every person, every relationship, every business, and your finances should be extraordinary. Find out more about Dr. Nisi Moore and the Life Coaching Institute at www.drnisi.com. That's DRNEECIE. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. It's so great to be with you. I'm really glad you're here, because let me start out by saying that this interview you're about to listen to came in handy when producing this episode. For some reason, I ran into some hiccups with my recording software today that I just could not figure out, and I was really tempted to get pissed. But thanks to the wise words of today's guest, I was able to stay focused and in the moment, despite the moment not going the way I was wanting it to. Today's interview might just blow your mind like it did mine, because up until this interview, I kept the words and the ideas of meditation and relaxation in tiny boxes labeled, "I know what that is." And this interview blew those little boxes up in a good way. My guest today is Julianna Raye, founder of Unified Mindfulness, and I'm so grateful she and I were able to connect, because I know your ideas about meditation and relaxation are about to expand. So sit back, relax, and I'll see you on the other side. As CEO, lead content developer, and head trainer at unifiedmindfulness.com, Julianna Raye is devoted to deepening people's understanding of research-supported mindfulness and empowering anyone to guide others in its practice. She has trained individuals, groups, and organizations in the practice of mindfulness for 2 decades, and she developed the official teacher training program for the United Mindfulness System, designed by Shinzen Young. With more than 150 weeks of immersive silent retreat training in both the mindfulness and Zen traditions, Julianna has completed over 20,000 hours of formal practice. Julianna has co-authored papers from the study published in 2 prominent science journals, Mindfulness and the Journal of Occupational Health Psychology. Julianna, welcome to the summit.
It's a pleasure to be here. I couldn't resist that. Internally that happens too. We just call it, so we actually have unitedmindfulness.com just in case. So, but unified, the idea being bringing it all together, because people are familiar with meditation, but it can get confusing. There's this way to do it. There's that way to do it. Is there some extra benefit of doing this one way? I don't want to waste my time. This person's telling me to do these instructions. That person's telling me to do a different set of instructions. I don't know what's right. I don't know what I'm supposed to, and therefore that's one more reason not to do it. Because anyway, when I do it and I stop and I sit still, I feel impatient. So all the things come up. So I guess I'm no good at this, and anyway, it's confusing and I'm out of here. So unified, the idea being, let's bring it all together. Yeah.
Gotcha. And that is so great, because that you just said all the things that in all the conversations I've had with people, you just nailed all the top things that people bring up, right? So before we begin, since you shared with me that you're also a singer-songwriter as well, what was your favorite concert to play?
Yeah, so my favorite concert was actually Jones Beach in 2005. I opened for Stevie Nicks and Don Henley, and that was awesome because, especially because I grew up in New Jersey, but my mom grew up in Long Island, and she would take us to Jones Beach every summer to hang out on the beach. So I had a lot of fond memories, and the concert itself was right around my birthday. So, and it was glorious. It was a beautiful night. You know, people were really engaged. I just had the time of my life at that concert. That's
That
why.
is amazing. That's, I shared with you, like my grandparents had a house in Long Island as well. So in the summer we would go there, and we would go to Jones Beach. Very fond memories of being at Jones Beach as a little kid. And I can only imagine, like, as an adult coming back as an artist and being able not only to just link those memories, but then to open for Stevie Nicks and Don Henley. Like, that
Yeah,
must have been awesome.
it was totally awesome. Gotta say. Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah.
All right. So you today are going to kind of talk us through about like a lowering stress on the go, which is a key strategy for busy people. And I think in our crazy busy society, most of us kind of consider ourselves busy people. So I think this is going to be spot on for our community. So take it away.
Cool. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, as I pointed out, a lot of people make assumptions about what it looks like to be relaxed and what it looks like to lower your stress. And one of those assumptions is you got to be lying on a table getting a massage, for instance, but you got to be chill, you know? And I don't have time to be chill. So so my stress is through the roof, you know? Or if you meditate, you have to be seated in silence with your eyes closed, and I don't have the time to do any of those things, and nor do I like doing any of those things necessarily. I'm a person who likes to go and be moving. And so I think there's some assumptions we make that are mistaken, that we can, you know, bust a couple of those myths. For one thing, you might be surprised to know that you can be feeling discomfort internally and still be actively lowering your stress. So we do not have to be physically relaxed in order to be lowering our stress. I know, right? It's counterintuitive, but it turns out that when you have skillful attention, and I'm going to define specifically what that means, you can greet unpleasant experience skillfully with your attention, and that you're activating a skill that we call equanimity, and that equanimity reduces cortisol levels, at least in one study that was done recently using the Unified Mindfulness System. So they did a 14-day trial, and they showed that when we isolate this skill called equanimity, which I'll get into, that it didn't matter whether the experience was pleasant or unpleasant. As long as that equanimity was engaged, we're seeing overall reduction in stress levels, cortisol levels, which is associated with stress. So that's a big revelation, that there are things we can do even if we're feeling awful inside. There are ways we can skillfully work with our attention that are going to, in the big picture, reduce our stress levels overall. So that's really cool. And another thing is this really common one of either, you know, I hate sitting still, and I'm no good at this. Every time I sit still, I see, you know, my seething busy mind, and it freaks me out, and I'm not going to do that anymore. Or whatever reason you have, I just like moving gets me out of my head. Whatever your logic is, your rationale is. A lot of people don't like to, when they think of meditation, they think of sitting still, eyes closed, and they don't like that. So then I guess I must not be able to meditate. So that's the second myth I'm going to bust for you today. And the way I'm going to do that is that what's beautiful about the unified system, and really kind of where we get this name unified from, is that Shinzen Young, who designed the system, looked at the whole spectrum of meditative approaches worldwide. And he came up with some unifying principles. And the fundamental part of it that he did was to shift it from the form the meditation takes, to shift the focus from the form it takes to the skills that are being developed in any case. So regardless of what meditative practice you do, you're developing, the way we identify it, as 3 fundamental skills. And when you understand those fundamental skills, when you understand how to develop them, when those skills are working together, we can say that you're being mindful. And any meditation technique is going to help you develop those skills. It's just that oftentimes it's baked in and it's implicit. It's not clear enough. So people don't understand, oh, that's why I'm focusing on the breath, for instance. You kind of make assumptions. There must be something special about the breath. And so therefore I should focus on it. But hey, I don't enjoy focusing on the breath. I find it boring, or I find it even stresses me out more sometimes, right? Some people. So we move away from the form the technique takes, because if you focus on form, if you say everybody must focus on the breath, then you're going to lose some people. Some people are not going to enjoy that. It's not going to work for them. And anyway, focusing on the breath is not the easiest thing to do when you're running around in daily life or at all, right? Necessarily. So what we want to do is find ways to engage people, meet people where they live, in their lived true experience. And when you understand, oh, there are these attention skills and I can apply these attention skills in this situation, and that's going to reduce my stress, my overall stress levels in the long term. Obviously, well, there is an instantaneous aspect to it, where it tends to be the case that if we're more skillful in how we deal with this situation in this moment, things will tend to go better. But then there's also the longer range of, if we get into the habit of greeting this situation and that situation and that situation using these skills, then we've developed this long-term habit where we see this base level increase of well-being and the reduction of stress taking place more and more over time. So the advantage to this skills paradigm is that you're freed up to practice anywhere you go. And you could think of that in science terms as dosage. You can increase your dose of meditation training once you understand it as, oh, I'm developing these 3 skills, and I can practice these skills anytime I want. I can practice them while I'm driving if I have a technique that keeps me safe, right? That's the caveat. No closing your eyes while driving. So once you kind of understand, oh, there are these 3 skills, this is how I develop them, I can apply them in any situation. I have technique strategies to apply them, so that makes sense to me. Once you have that framework down, the sky is the limit. And suddenly every situation you're in becomes an opportunity to lower your stress. And yes, that's right. That's the potential of it. So with that, maybe I'll lead you all through a little guided session so I can familiarize you with how kind of gives, basically, we're taking your experience and we're turning it into a gym. And we're saying, hey, you can work out these skills in any aspect of your experience, but that's kind of overwhelming to think of. So we got to have some order to it. So what we do is we divide your senses into 3 categories: what you see, what you hear, and what you feel. 3 simple categories: see, hear, feel. And then we have an inner aspect and an outer aspect. So see can include both what you see in the world, but also what you see in your mind. Sometimes we get lost in a daydream, or sometimes we check in and there's nothing going on in the mind, that very pleasant blank screen, you could say, where there's just no thought. Wow, wonderful. So you can make the most of that. So what we see in the world, what we see in the mind, what we hear in the world, what we hear in the mind. We're all familiar with that mental chatter, that voice telling us blah, 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 blah. For many of us, it's incessant. So what do we do about that? Well, it turns out another common myth about meditation is you have to get rid of that voice, and I can't get rid of that voice, so I must be lame at this. Forget it. Well, actually, again, going on the principle I talked about earlier, you just need to know how to be skillful with that voice, and you're reducing your stress. So there are options. So what we see, what we hear, and then what we feel, we divide that into what you feel emotionally and what you feel physically. We include taste and smell in the physical because that's just for ease of use. But in terms of what you feel emotionally, the value there is, where does a lot of our stress come from? A lot of our stress comes from, below the surface of our awareness. We're triggered emotionally. We're reacting emotionally to this, that, or the other thing. And we don't know how to effectively process it. We don't have, you could say, good emotional hygiene. And therefore, our emotions get all entangled with our thinking, and we get into this kind of spiral that takes us down a rabbit hole. So you may be worried about a project you're doing for work. Oh, it was due yesterday, it's not finished. So then you have some fear and anxiety, and then you picture your boss yelling at you, and then that triggers you, no matter what I'm doing, they don't deserve to yell at me that way. Right. And of course, this hasn't actually happened, but this is what's going on in your mind. And there is this, what's happening in that scenario is the feel of your emotions are pinging the here of your self-talk. I don't deserve to be talked to that way. And the image of your boss yelling at you, right? So those ingredients are combining in ways we're not aware of. We've never been taught to consider that's in that moment where you're arguing with yourself in your head, or you're arguing with your boss or what have you, that there are these ingredients coming together, and that it is the pairing of these sensory input points, right? The emotions and the thinking. It's the combining of those without our awareness that escalates, that takes us down that rabbit hole. So once we understand that, we can learn how to disentangle those parts. And I guess I gotta go and just dive into the technique, right? No more talking. So suffice it to say, I'm gonna take you on a quick guided tour. It's gonna be super quick, but it's gonna familiarize you with the basics of this. And if you wanna learn more, there'll be ways to learn more. But this is just a way to let you know, yeah, this makes sense logically. I get where you're coming from, and I see how I could do it in daily life. And then I'll give you a couple tips for takeaways. So let's start with this. And of course, just for this sensitizing exercise, we're going to be seated, and we're going to go through this routine like you would meditation where you're seated. But hopefully you'll see how it transfers. It'll be obvious to you how it can transfer into daily life. So let's take a moment and lengthen our spines. That's a nice way to signal to the body, hey, we're going to do a workout right now in this gym of see, hear, feel. And I'm going to ask you to start, if you're comfortable, by closing your eyes and quickly checking in with that part of your experience. So bring your attention to that area around your closed eyes and just notice what's true for you right now. As you check in with that area, so you've leveraged your attention to bring it to that area. We'll call it the mental screen, just to have a name for it. You're noticing whether you have images on that mental screen, or whether it's basically blank. And a blank screen could be light or dark or some mottled mixture, pixelation, but you're not seeing images. So see what's true for you right now. The images can also be wispy, vague, a sense of yourself in the room, for instance. It's all good. There's no right or wrong. There's no better or worse. Just what's true for you right now. Pay attention for just a minute in that space we're calling the mental screen. And you're just attempting to be curious with whatever you notice. No preference, no good or bad. And now I'm going to ask you to open your eyes. And a couple of options here. First, we're going to do what we call a soft gaze. If you've ever run or done a sport like that, a lot of times runners, they look through the world. They don't look at anything in particular. And this kind of conserves their energy, keep their energy in the body, maybe on the breath. So you can softly gaze, not looking at anything in particular. Some people like to do this with their eyes at half mast, where they're looking down. Relax the muscles around the eyes, looking through the world, not at anything in particular. This is a more restful way of seeing. It's simple, it's uncomplicated. So see if you can appreciate the simplicity of this restful way of seeing. And if your attention gets tugged to other things that are louder to you, like sound in the room, for instance, or thinking. If your attention gets tugged, bring it back to the soft gaze. That will strengthen your ability to focus on what you choose, which is one of our skills we're developing. And now we're going to let your attention wander. So you're going to look around your room, but I'd like you to spend a few seconds, let your attention land on an object, and then spend a few seconds noticing details about the object. And then let your attention move, spend a few seconds noticing details about another object. Or you could renew your focus on the same object. But the pattern is acknowledge what you're focusing on and spend a few seconds noticing details about it. Acknowledge what you're focusing on. By acknowledge, I just mean placing your attention somewhere and spend a few seconds. And now you're going to close your eyes again if you would like to. You could leave them open. Some people find it easier to concentrate with eyes closed, whatever is comfortable for you. Bring your attention to this area we're going to call talk space, just to have a name for it. This area where you would hear mental chatter if any was going on. You'd hear yourself talking to yourself.
Just a sec.
Siri off.
Still trying. I didn't get that. Could you try again?
So again, you're treating it the same way. You're becoming curious and interested. If there's mental chatter, noticing that there's chatter, but trying not to engage in it, get caught up in the meaning of it. And if there's mental quiet, appreciating that restful absence of chatter. And now bringing your attention to sound in the world, right? So I had a little interruption right there. You may be on your end having interruptions that call your time, your attention. So is it quiet or is it noisy in the world? And I think we got to pick up the pace on this. So I'm going to go a little bit faster and just sensitize you. Like I say, this is all available elsewhere. So you can even listen to me talk right now. And try to listen to me talking without paying attention to the meaning. Try to listen to the rhythm, the pace, the tone, the pitch, the variation. Tim can definitely appreciate this one. And now we're going to take it into the body real quick. We're going to first check in to see whether we notice emotions in the body. Are you noticing anything that you would call emotional right in this moment? That's how we determine it. It's nothing, no secret sauce here. Just right now, do you notice emotions? And if you wonder, is that an emotion? Is it not an emotion? Assume it isn't. So it's only if it's obviously emotional for you right now, check in, see what's true for you in the body. If you're noticing emotions, have a sense of curiosity about that. If there are no emotions, appreciate that peaceful absence of emotion. And lastly, we're going to check in with the physical body, what we feel physically. So keep your attention in the body, let it move around and see what you see. This is a large space. You might be drawn to one location, like the breath. You might be drawn to particular sensations in parts of the body, but you also might be drawn to an overall relaxation. You can choose to focus on the relaxation. So just pick places to focus, spend a few seconds on whatever you're focusing on in the body and appreciate it. We'll do that just for about 20 seconds. Okay, so apologies for the pacing of the tour. I know we had to rush at the end there. But the bottom line is the intention of it is to, first of all, show you that any part of your experience is an opportunity for focusing. And I had a couple of key words there. I said things like be curious, no judgment, or no preference, I said. That's an example of this skill we call equanimity. And equanimity is the skill that study determined was essential for lowering those cortisol levels. So we want to try to have a sense of openness, curiosity, friendliness, also intentionally relaxing parts of the body where we can find relaxation, create relaxation, can also help induce equanimity. So there's a logic behind people's thinking that, hey, when you're relaxed, that lowers stress, right? Is because that relaxation is can be correlated with equanimity, but it's not the only way. And so it's useful to understand that actually what's going on is we can leverage our attention to have a relationship with our experience that reduces our stress. And it can be any experience at all, whether pleasant or unpleasant.
That is mind-blowing that we don't have to be physically relaxed to lower stress.
Yeah.
And that just like, wait, what? You completely broke what I thought were like the rules of, stress, like, wait, hold on a second. And that is why I'm so glad that you just kicked off day 2, because if you just blew my mind, and I'm a nerd on this already, and that's what I love about this journey is like, you can be like, oh, I've learned this and I've learned that. And then one day, whack, you get hit with this like wisdom nugget from Julianna Raye at 10:05 in the morning. And you're just like, what? That's possible. And I think that's what's so powerful is when you learn that there's what's possible, it opens your doors of and like hope and excitement and inspiration and courage all flow in because now you realize what's possible. So Julianna, that's amazing.
My pleasure. Yeah. One way to think about it is there are circumstances we can rely on to help us with stress. And those circumstances can be external, like a beach and the water, right? But they can also be the circumstance of being relaxed. But then there are ways we can leverage our attention skillfully. And that leveraging of our attention skillfully, it turns out, is a deeply empowering way that we can lower stress. And so that's really what we're speaking into.
Yes, because your circumstances, like they're an external thing and we all know how much control we have over the external world. Ha 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 ha.
Right.
So, like the fact that you're like, that doesn't matter as much as you think it does. It can help, but it's not a requirement for relaxation.
Absolutely. And also that you look at it as a long-term game. So we can say to ourselves, I can't get myself to relax. Oh no, that, like people who can't fall asleep, right? Oh no, I can't get myself to sleep. I'm destroying myself. There's that added worry of, right? Understand, no, there are things you can do. You may not be able to get yourself to relax. You may not be able to get yourself to fall asleep, but you can leverage your attention in specific ways, equanimity being a key one. The other being concentration, which is the ability to focus on what you choose. Mm-hmm. And then the third one is what we call sensory clarity, which is this noticing of details about your experience. And it's a high def relationship to our experience where that has two benefits. Yeah, one is when we start to notice in my example earlier that it's the fact that emotions are feeding into our thinking and how those are combining. That's one way sensory clarity works to reduce overwhelm, because we take apart we see all the moving parts, and that helps lower the stress. But also on the flip side, we can refine our appreciation of subtle, for example, relaxation that we might be overlooking because the noise is pulling our focus. If we can start to appreciate subtle experience more, then we can actually either deepen our fulfillment of it if it's relaxation, but to our point before we started this, you were noticing some annoying sounds outside and the Siri thing went off, right? If you have a subtle reaction that's kind of irritated, if you can bring equanimity to that subtle experience, that's very preventative. And that's a little thing we can do all the time, is just catch ourselves in the act of a little mild irritation and have a sense of openness or willingness, allow that experience to come and go freely. And that's our equanimity.
That's beautiful. And that, I feel, is for a lot of us who are, working a game of well-being and health in our life. And like, we may not have a 3-alarm fire going day to day, but we've got these little brush fires, right? And those little brush fires stack on each other, right? And we don't keep track, but they do. And so being able to, kind of dial into the subtle, really leaning into the subtle, is really where the game can move. And that's really, really cool. You and I could go all day without taking a breath. I can tell just from us hanging out the couple of times we have. So I want to just thank you, like, from the bottom of my heart. This was just so insightful for me personally, and I'm sure it was for our community. Where can people find out more about you and Unified Mindfulness online?
Absolutely. So the easiest thing is to go to unifiedmindfulness.com/core. And that's a free 10 video series. So you can learn, sorry, what'd you say? Core, actually CORE, thanks. unifiedmindfulness.com/CORE, core program. And it's an 11 video series. It's free for everyone. So we want everyone to have access to these skills. By the end of that little training, you will know, you'll get reinforced with all this material I just gave you, and it'll get really clear to you how to bring it into life. Yeah.
Julianna, this was great. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a beautiful rest of your day. And thank you again.
My pleasure. It's a treat, Tim, and keep up the wonderful work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for checking out this episode of Reduce Your Stress with Tim Ringgold. I've got a couple of resources for you, which you can find in the show notes or you can listen to right here. So check it out. If you enjoy the sound of my voice and you enjoy the sound of my guitar, imagine them put together. Go to sonicrecovery.com and take your very own relaxation vacation, where I take you out of the stress of the present moment and back in time to a time when you felt happy, healthy, safe, and sober, and then walk you through that memory so you can bring back those feelings into the challenges you're facing today. So go check that out. It's at sonicrecovery.com. If you're a healthcare worker in recovery, check out the Music in Recovery Self-Care Guide for healthcare professionals that I created just for you. That's at hcp.sonicrecovery.com. And if you're a healthcare worker and you'd like more information about how to help your patients use music, you can check out the Music Medicine Guide that I created just for you at musicmedicineguide.com. Lastly, if you enjoyed the pod and you haven't done it yet, would you just take a minute to rate and review it? It really only takes about 60 seconds, believe it or not, and it would go a long way to help us make more people know just how good this pod is, particularly for healthcare workers and their stress. Thanks again. See you next time.